All right. I am fired up about this episode. Adam, your beard is intimidating. I'm just going to say it. It's impressive.
Dude.
It's intimidated. I don't know how you do it because I can't get past like a week without shaving. So let's just start
Yeah,
there.
you have to get past that week and then it gets better. For me, it's like past 3 weeks because it grows down to my chest hair. So like it takes a lot of that itchiness. It's a pain. So it takes a little
So,
bit.
a
And the
lot of
beard is intimidating
connective.
because nothing else on me is. Yes. Oh yes, it very much is connected. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
Adam, I think one of the things you're highlighting right now too is that I think it really boils down to, so I have I can't grow it. So
Hmm.
it's not a feat of strength or fortitude, whereas Stu just can't get past that first week because of weakness, right? Like he can't
Uh-huh.
get past it because
True.
of weakness.
Yeah.
I wish I had the opportunity, like, dude, it doesn't come in for me at all. But I would just attribute it, I give you props for your strength to be able to push through week one, despite the connectivity between the chest,
Yes.
the beard, potentially. What you got hair going on up top, or are
Oh yeah. Oh
how's
yeah.
that going?
Still good there,
Oh, look at
thankfully.
you,
Yeah.
man.
And my
Yeah,
beard
see,
even
I'm
connects
just
behind. Like it is ridiculous. When I was in Afghanistan, that was the first time I'd ever grown a beard. I didn't know I could grow a beard. And then when I grew it, I realized, holy crap, it like connects under my ears to the back of my head. It connects down to my
that's
chest
so
hair.
good.
Like our team sergeant, he looked at me, he's like, dog guy, you're looking like Wolf Man. We got to trim that up. And I was like,
That's so good.
I'll fix that. So we did. But yeah.
That's so good, man. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm jealous. I feel like at some point in this interview, the beard is going to actually start answering questions. That's just my sense.
That's a
Could
possibility.
happen, maybe
Yeah.
not.
Or the
And I
bird
think
that
is
lives in
today.
there may come out.
There you go. Something might, like, you got a kid in there. I know you got three kids. Maybe one of them just kind of snuggled up in
Huh.
there. But yeah, and I promise we're not just going to talk about your beard this entire podcast. One of the things that I love about, this is our first time that we've met. You and Stu
Yeah.
met, and the fact that you agreed to come on the show, having just met him, is actually it's still a shocker to me that that happens, and I applaud you for that. But as you're very open as we are about loving being a dad, loving
Mhm.
business, and also loving Jesus, right? Being a man of
Yeah.
faith. And, we are talking slightly, before, and I think you guys will appreciate this, but yesterday, just being completely honest and real and vulnerable, I was like, I'm not a type of guy that is, despairs often. I'm not, I'm a very super optimistic person, typically pretty happy, dance with my kids, do things. But man, yesterday, like I was just overwhelmed. I got home, I was thinking about, the kinetic man, and thinking about just, building the business and the pressures that we have to try to make this thing as amazing as possible for as many men as possible. And I got home. I'm like, it's beautiful out, boys. Let's go out. I love taking my kids outside, getting the neighbor kids, and we play football. And I'm all-time
Mhm.
quarterback and all this. But my boys are always like fighting, right? And I just it overwhelmed me yesterday for some reason. And I had to step back because I was getting real frustrated with my middle guy. I'm like, all you guys do is complain. And I was like, look outside. Look how beautiful it is. Look at this day the Lord has made. And I was like, and I shouldn't have said this, but I'm like, look around the neighborhood. How many dads are out here playing with their kids? And my son was like, zero. And I'm like, yeah. So like, can you show a little bit of gratitude? I was just so overwhelmed, man.
Mhm.
And I sat down on the stairs, and I'm like, you guys play for a couple minutes. Just give me a sec. My back is sore, whatever. I made up some excuse. But I started praying. I was like, Lord, like, what is this overwhelm? What is this overwhelm? And like, why am I feeling this? Like, why am I so emotional? It's kind of like breaking down, dude. And I bring that up to highlight, we talk a lot about being a dad, and today we're going to talk about being
Mhm.
a dad and the amazing aspects of being a dad and a business owner. And you have the Biz Dad podcast, and we're going to talk about stories that are the men that we want to become and who we want to be and who
Yeah.
we strive for. But it's not always that way, man. Like, being a dad can be hard and it can be overwhelming. And I just wanted to shake the crap out of all of them, right? Even the ones that
Mhm.
weren't mine. I
Yeah.
just wanted to shake them, but I really had to step back. And what I would say is, I'm super comforted knowing that there's dudes in our tribe, and there's dudes like you who are so focused on on maximizing this life and being the best dads possible,
Yeah.
being the best businessmen possible, being the best servant leaders to others possible. And sometimes we break down, dude. Like
Mhm.
sometimes it just is not rainbows and unicorns and awesomeness. Sometimes you're sitting on the stairs because you had to step back playing football with your kids on a beautiful day in Colorado with snow on the ground and almost break down and weep, just like, God, why am I not the man I want to be? But in that process and being able to talk about it, you could come right out of that. And I'll tell you, it wasn't 30 minutes later, I initiated a snowball fight, an ice ball fight. The snow's been on the ground for a couple days. And just like pegging these kids and having a great time and laughing and other kids in the neighborhood coming and enjoying it. And so I give that long-winded story, and I apologize, long just to highlight to dads out here. And as we start this interview, it's not always easy, it's not always awesome, but there's redemption in it and it can be awesome. And we can, in the moment, turn things around. And so, to that, dude, Adam, tell us how to be better dads and businessmen and serve,
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. All
yeah.
right. Man, I think that story it tells a lot in and of itself. One is that you took a second to realize that you were making a mistake, right? And said, "Okay, I need to step away," which all of us need to do from time to time. Like we needed to do it when we were in the military, we need to do it as dads, we need to do it as business owners across the board. So you take that time, you step aside, realize you're making a mistake, um, and try to correct it, which automatically tells me that you're a good dad, right? Because you're doing those steps to try to get better. And I think in a lot of cases, that's all we can expect is to do what we can. Like we're going to make a mistake. It's bound to happen, but learning from it and then teaching our kids that we've learned from it as well, right? And showing like it, apologizing to our kids when that happens, right? Because the thing that you could have said to yourself in that moment was, ah, look at this beautiful day that I get to hang out here, even though my kids are bickering. This wonderful day that I get to play football with my kids. But instead, we get a little bit of that flesh moment, a little bit of that selfish moment, and we go, "What's wrong with you? I'm the only dad out here playing, right?" But we all do those same silly things, and just recognizing that we're doing it and stepping back and realizing, okay, I need to fix this, I need to adjust it, and then have the conversation with the kid, right? And to me, that's one of the more important parts of that is also having that chat with the kid afterwards to say, "Hey, daddy made a mistake." I like one of the things I like to talk to my boys about is reacting versus responding. Reacting is usually an emotion, it's immediate, it's right there. And responding is taking that moment to assess what's actually going on and then respond to the activity as opposed to reacting to it. And you took that moment literally and you sat back and said, "Dear Lord, please help me. I need a minute." But that's something that I always try to teach the boys. So I commend you for taking that moment to step aside and say, "Hey, let me let this settle for a second," because my boys are 9 and 5, and they show me daily that they're brothers, and they're bound to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good on you.
10-7, man. 10-7. Well, and my boy could have probably also said, "Hey, Dad, you're also the only dad out in the street like yelling at his kids."
True story. Yes.
Hey, Adam, let's go back. Let's take a step back
Yeah.
and let's do a little introduction for. I mean, we
Mhm.
we just like got right into being a dad, but give us a little background about who you are and what you did and now what do you do now?
Sure. Yeah. So I was a military brat turned military guy, paycheck to paycheck for a very long time as in my enlisted time. Got married after I got out of the military the first time, and then my wife is also Air Force, and we've been married now for almost 14 years. Um, when I got married to her, she had this what I tell people all the time, this magical thing called a savings account that I had never heard of before. So she was kind of my introduction to what it means to save money and invest, and I just like I'm not sure I knew how to spell the word invest. I think it was somewhere in my vocabulary, but I didn't know. So I learned a lot. I jumped into it. We started having kids 4 years after we got married. We now have three kids, two boys, 9 and 5, and a little girl who's 9 months old, almost 10 months old now. So we're all done now. Supposedly, we'll see if God gives us any surprise here at the end. But yeah, so I went back into the military as an officer for a while. I was supposed to be a pilot. I busted my neck and lost my pilot spot the day before pilot training. They said, "Hey, bud, sorry, you can never pull G's, so we're not putting you in a plane." So uh, so yeah, I did that for another quite a while, and then I started buying apartment buildings and helping build this company called Active Duty Passive Income. We teach military members and veterans how to invest in real estate. So I started doing that while I was on active duty, and I kept on pressing, became a dad, and said, "Nah, something needs to change." So now I do real estate and dad full time.
So your LinkedIn profile, and I'm going to steal David's question. It says that you got out of the military at 18 years.
Yeah.
Let's not talk specifically about that, but let's talk about you had said that something needed to change. Like you
Mm,
were doing real estate, you were doing military, and the decision that you got out was because something needed to change.
yeah.
What was that and why?
Um, So I think the easy answer is I had kids, right? But the long answer is I mean everybody has a lot of people have kids, right? So that's not necessarily something that changes it. So when we were stationed in Japan, I was traveling a lot. I loved doing what I did. I loved being able to travel. I was sent places to go fix problems rather often. I was constantly gone, so much so that like my going away gift said Adam always TDY Labar. So for those non-military folks, it's temporary duty. I was always gone. And then at the bottom it said thanks for visiting. One of the times I was leaving my house, I only had the one kid at the time. He was probably 4 years old, so my wife was probably pregnant with our second. Um, and I grabbed the trash and I was taking the trash out, and Adam came running up to me, said, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, don't leave again." And I was literally just taking the trash out, and that was like a massive punch in the stomach. And I'd been wanting to be a dad since I was like 13 years old. So to to see the amount of um, on purpose or not on purpose absentee fathers in the military, and then to have my kid tell me that, I said that won't be me. I can't do that. I got to figure something else out. And that was the beginning of my journey to figure out how I was going to leave the military. I'd already started investing in real estate, so I already knew that that was likely what was going to be what financially supported us as I jumped ship. Plus, my wife is also, like I said, still in the military, so um, I just knew that I couldn't do what I was doing. That wasn't a sustainable model as a dad. So yeah.
Well, and I don't want to gloss over that. Stu may not want to have go here, but for those for any of our military members listening or former military members, like they understand the significance of leaving at around the 18-year mark, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to gloss over that. For anybody who's not in the military, I mean, that is significant. There is potentially money left on the table, significant amount of money left on the table to just push a couple more years and retire. And I think, I'm curious, did you get advice from like was there anybody in your circles that's like, "Dude, that's crazy, just push through to retirement. Just all you need is a couple more years." Did you have this pressure to do it? And also on the other side of that, I want you to address how powerful redefining success is and what truly like the life you want to live can be so powerful if you spend the time to dive into that
Mhm.
that it'll cause you to leave millions on the table potentially or to do
Yeah.
things that are crazy, right? Like that people be like, "Oh, that's so stupid." Well, no, it's not stupid because you have
Yeah.
no idea what I'm living for. So if you don't mind addressing that, I'd love it.
Yeah. So to the first question, yes, I had a lot of people giving me a call, right? So I had 15 and a half years total active. I had a couple years of reserves in between my enlisted and my officer time. And once I got married, I went into the reserves and did that for a while before I decided to go back to be a pilot. So I had a lot of people telling me I was absolutely crazy because nobody does that. And I was that same person back. I watched people get out at 15 years, 16 years, and I was like, what is wrong with you? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I asked those same questions. And it wasn't until I was in the situation that I realized, oh, they clearly made the calculus. Like it's not just the military side of the house, like it's constantly ingrained in us. Like, you get your 20 years, you get your retirement, and then you're like, that's just what you have to do. You get your 20 years, you get your retirement. You get your 20 years, you get your retirement. There's never the conversation about what the loss is in those 20 years. There's never the conversation about what you do after those 20 years, other than you can take your uniform off and put a suit take your uniform off on Friday, put your suit on Monday, and sit in the same chair. We'll give you a GS-12, GS-13 job. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. It's like I don't want that, right? Um, what I was building for my family was way more than what I was going to get on a retirement check. Um, I was already looked at twice for potential medical separation slash medical retirement, given like I said, I busted my neck and lost my pilot spot. I had already had a neck surgery, shoulder surgery. I was pretty busted up. And so it's like, look, I'm likely going to be 100% disabled anyways. So there goes that. And if I get medically retired, it doesn't change anything. I'm like, I don't like, there's no point. I've got to be done. Maybe I'll just finish off in the reserves. But when you have an idea, and I'm saying, okay, I'll change it to just me. When I had an idea of what I wanted my future to be, which I think everybody should have an idea of what they want their future to be, especially if you're a dad, um, because you need to be your future is going to change what your kid's future is. So if you can figure out where your future is going to be, you're going to change the way your kid's future becomes. And there was no way that I wanted my kid's future to be FaceTiming for birthdays again, right? My kid's first birthday, I was FaceTiming from Africa. Okay, here I am thinking I'm doing something good for the world. I'm on the other side of the world. What better thing can I do for the world than to raise men that are going to follow God, marry well, raise good kids? That is way more impactful in the world than sitting on my butt in a tent in Africa. So those are the types of things that my calculus was like, okay, I need to do more as a dad than more as a military member. Um, so I don't know if I fully answered. I think I answered the question, but there's a lot like figure out
I
what your
love that,
future
dude.
is. Like, and
Well,
to me, it was being a dad.
and one thing I wrote down is know the future you want, dot dot dot, because that is a true legacy you're potentially passing down, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a fascinating concept, and I think more of us need to. A lot of us, especially those of us who are inclined to serve and military members, nothing bad about, dude, I did it for 20 years, right? Stu did it for 20 years. Like, I would never fault it, but I was very intentional in the things the career path I chose and the ways that I went, and always being willing to say, okay, I'm about to hang this up
Hmm.
because of these other things, or I can continue because it's in line with what I want to do. And so I love how you said that a lot of us will be very, we kind of hide behind the service thing, and that becomes the reason, that becomes the honorable thing to do,
Yeah.
which it is honorable, but at what expense? And
Yeah.
have we considered the honor it is to be a dad and what we can pass down and how because look at the stats, man. Look at the stats of households with dads in it. And it's
Hmm.
very eye-opening. It's shocking. And to think that that isn't a huge impact, and then also compare that with the divorce rate in the military. I'm just
Yeah.
being real, right? I'm just being real. And so when you look at those things, man, it is the calculus a lot of times is pretty darn simple, and
Yeah.
it's clear, but we just don't think about it, right? And we don't ask people like Adam. We don't have buddies like Stu to be like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, is this sustainable? Is this good? Is this bad? And to be able to bounce that off, be like, oh, that's a different consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
Another thing that for me, and it's again, I don't want to. It's funny because a lot of these conversations I've had, I guess you could say inadvertently talked a lot of people out of getting out of the military, or talked a lot of people into getting out of the
Into
military.
getting out,
And it
yeah.
was like, and they're like, dude, I'm totally jumping ship. And like they'll reach out to me afterwards and be like, dude, thank you so much. I left the military. And I'm like, that not intentional, right? I'm not, but if you're being intentional about it, then I'm all about it. Like, go for it. But don't just do it on a whim. Don't just do it because you heard Adam on some podcast talk about leaving the military and he's happy being a dad. Like, put the thought through it. Talk to your spouse. Understand what you're doing. Understand what you're giving up. Understand what you are gaining, and make the decision wisely. And this is, I don't want to go too down a negative path, but I started looking at, okay, I spent, and this has especially been over the last couple of years after getting out, realizing a little bit more on why I was happy I did it. I was like, okay, I spent a bunch of time in Iraq to watch that fall apart. I spent a bunch of time in Afghanistan to watch that fall apart. I spent time in Niger to watch that fall over to a coup. And it's like, okay, well, I'm supposedly out doing all of this stuff to impact. Like, is my family the next thing that falls apart if I'm not actually present? Because I can have a huge impact here in my house. I decided to start homeschooling this year. Me personally, I'm the one who does the homeschool because my wife is still active duty, right? Because I want to have that impact in my family. I want to be the one that, because I I can be sent anywhere around the world for the military side of the house, and maybe I make an impact, maybe I don't. Um, but I know I can make an impact here, and I mean, means a lot to me.
Hey, I'm curious, Adam, where does this passion of being a present dad come from? Did you have a present dad? Did you have a great relationship with your dad, or did you have an absent dad? I'm just curious,
Um,
or somewhere in
I
between.
wouldn't say he was, yeah, I'd say probably somewhere in between. He was absent in so much in a couple different ways. One is he was always working a lot. So he supported the family in the best way he knew how. Well, his real dad died when he was 2. So he never really got to know who his real dad was. Um, his stepdad was a horrendous human being who did a lot of beating of my father, and there was a lot of things going on that I didn't learn about until much later in my life. So the more I looked at him and the more I learned about him, like I always thought I was missing something when I was a kid. Like I didn't have that. Like once in a great while, I'd have that dad I could throw a football with, but almost never. Um, then he was never able to show up to any of my sports games or matches. He was never able to do any of that stuff. So, but he provided for the family in so much that we had a house, we had food, we had, we were taken care of in that way, and that's the only way he knew how. So he wasn't able to support me as a son in the way that I thought I should have, but he didn't have the tools to be able to do it. He never had it was he was never given those tools, so how could he possibly give it to me? And it wasn't until much later in life I kind of realized that. And the more I realized that, the more I was like, I really need to make sure I'm pouring into my kids. God has given me an amazing skill set through both the military, through trials and tribulations, through all sorts of life experiences that I've had that I can pour into my kids. I'll sit down and talk to my kids about war. It's just like this is part of what life is there's terrible atrocities that happen in life. Let's talk about it. There are wonderful experiences that happen in life. Like they want like bedtime stories. They want me to tell real stories of real things that have happened in real life, as opposed to just making stories up. I do a little bit of both, right? But they love to be able to do that, and I want to be able to pour that into them. Something I never really got because my dad wasn't able to do it. So if I'm able to, then it's I think I forget who said it. It was a saying I recently heard again. Was like, um, if you're able to make a change for the good, you're required to make the change for the good, right? And so I need to make that change for my kids to make sure that they're seeing it.
Yeah, dude, I love it, man. I think one of the biggest problems right now for men specifically is just the fatherless epidemic, and not necessarily like fathers like not just even in the home, but like fathers in the home but just not present because of a
Yeah.
similar reason that you're talking about, like your dad. And no fault to your dad. Like you said, he didn't have the tools. He thought he was doing what he needed to do. And I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of tools now that we do
Hmm.
have that men still have this feeling of like, I'm the provider. I need to work hard. I need to hustle. I need to grind. I need to make the money. I need to provide. And that's the only role that men see themselves having is the role of provider in a business in a money sense.
Hmm.
And I think we're failing. I think we're failing tremendously because there's way more roles in a man's
Yeah.
life than just being a money provider. Um, so I'm curious, as you got into this entrepreneur world and you started, real estate investing, you started businesses, you started a podcast, like how have you continued to maintain this idea of having to be a present father, right? Because like you have a lot going on.
Hmm.
David and I have a lot going on, and I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. There are men within this space, within the real estate investing space, business entrepreneur space that just go all out, right? And just like,
Yeah.
sun up to sundown, hustle, grind, say they're doing it for the family, but at the end of the day, are they really doing it for the family?
Yeah.
So, over to you. Like how do you manage it all?
I should have started off the beginning saying that I'm saying a lot that I'm learning. It doesn't mean I'm an expert in any of this, right? The
Same.
the downfall about talking about being a dad is sometimes you come across as like I'm the best dad in the world. You guys should too do the things I'm doing. By no means is that
Yeah.
anywhere near accurate. I have much more stories, like David was talking about at the beginning, about completely making mistakes with the kids. But I'll say that it is very difficult to kind of balance it, and I am still trying to figure it out. One of the like again, homeschooling was one of those things that I said, okay, I can pour into my kids for a few hours a day doing homeschooling and just be theirs, be right there next to them. And that's one of the reasons also I started the podcast, the Biz Dad podcast, was I could see, like you were saying, Stu, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that do the same thing we saw military members do, right? I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for the good. I'm doing this for good. And then are you really? Because you're not there. Like, are you really doing it for your kids? Are you doing it for your kids' future? Because you're not doing it for your kids' present, you know? And it's like, like they're not going to have the future you want unless you give them the present that they need, you know? So like make that happen. So, and I don't do a very good job at that. And right now I am very adamant that it is okay if the business doesn't do as well. Or if I'm not as present in the business, I shouldn't say that it doesn't do as well because the business does do really well. It's just if I'm not as present in the business because I'm more present in my kids' life. So, you know, I've taken them on we ADPI, we put on our conference in San Antonio. We drove across the country from Tampa to San Antonio as a family. Let's explore. We're going to spend time on the way out there. We're going to knock some school out on the way out there. You're going to be involved. Yes, daddy's going to be on stage. Yes, daddy's going to be working his butt off while we're there. You guys can go to Legoland and do all this stuff, but you get to be present with me. You get to go on these trips. We took a trip up to Philadelphia together, right? And New Jersey. I just came back from Vermont recently with them. So now I'm trying to include them in all of my travels, which I was not able to do in the military. And while we were in Vermont, so I'm in a group called Go Abundance. And on top of GoBundance, they have a group called FamBundance. Like it's just it's included. It's where you bring your family in. And we sat down and intentionally built out what the Barr family core values are. And I'm going to build this out onto a nice poster board, put it on the wall. It's going to be somewhere we can look at every single day. And we say, hey, Bars do that. Right. It doesn't look like you're meeting this core value right now. Right. So it's not like daddy's just depressed. Like, no, we have established these together as core values so we can go back to these things. And one of the things that came out of that was I asked my kids, what can I do to be a better dad? Because I want to always listen to what they think would be a better dad. And they get to look at me through this glass door all the time. Daddy's always working. Daddy's always working. Daddy's always working. Can you just maybe just 20 minutes, Dad? Just 20 minutes, like a couple times a week, come out and just play with us for just 20 minutes during the day. I said, buddy, let's do it. So right there, we put it in the calendar. This is their 30 minutes, 3 times a week. That it's dedicated to you guys. I'm gonna step outside and play. And that was one way that I did it is put like, I used to hate the idea of putting family time on the calendar because I was like, man, family time should be anytime, like all the time. And somebody helped me, and it's taken probably a year before it's really sunk in well. It was you're not putting them in the calendar, you're preserving that time so nobody else can take it away, right? So I'm not just finding a spot to put in my kids into the calendar. No, I'm preserving that time so nobody else can book on my calendar during that time. It's theirs and theirs alone. So that was another thing I started doing just literally last week was the first week we did it. And he just today he came in. Isn't today one of the days? Is today one of the days, right? We get to play, right? It was
Nice.
right before this
Nice.
podcast. So
They're the best
so yeah,
accountability partners that you can have.
dude, I'm telling you
Yeah,
what,
man.
he
Yeah.
remembers.
Dude, I'll tell you, you just said a bunch of things. It's so funny because there's so many parallels to the things that we do in the Kinetic Man. You know, we create family core values. Like we give tools to create core values. The calendar thing, dude, like we are extremely passionate about that. That's probably one of the biggest focus areas that we talk about is the calendar. And it's not the idea, like you said, so many people, that's so rigid. That's so you know, to plan it out. And the question I always love to ask is like, cool. Don't plan it out. How's that going for you now?
Yeah.
How's that going for you now? Like you're not doing it because it's not on your calendar, but you're making all the other meetings on your calendar, but you're not for like just think of it as like a super high priority meeting. Put your kids in
Hmm.
the calendar as a super high priority meeting, and that's all it is. Like it's just a change of mindset. And so I love that. And what really it made me think earlier when you were talking about, I think Stu said, excuse me, you know, they don't have the tools. Here's the thing that I think is amazing and you have it in GoBundance, we have it in the Connect Man. The tools, there are more tools than you could ever, you know, shake a stick at.
Yeah.
The critical part is, and if you desire to be better in as fatherhood, in business, whatever it is, the magic is surround yourself with a group of dudes on the same path or a group of people on the same path and the tools will manifest, right? So
Hmm.
like you said, it's not crazy. Like you know, a super simple example. And I talked to a guy, complete random stranger yesterday, amazing conversation. And I told him about the challenge we're doing in the Kinetic Man about just writing notes to your wife and kid. Like a little, dude, I have 4 notes to write a day. It takes me like a minute to write, you know, something very intentional to my wife and my 3 kids. and I stick him different places and they find him. Dude, my son came out yesterday, my middle guy, and he's like, Dad, remember that note you wrote me like days ago that you said you wanted to be like me? And I was like, yeah, man, because you're so kind. And he's like, I have that at school stuck to my name tag and I read it every day. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I had
That's
no
awesome.
idea. I stuck in his lunch. But my point is, it's not hard. That's a tool. That is a connection tool
Hmm.
that was born out of our group. And it wasn't my idea. It wasn't the collective came together and like, hey, I've done this thing. And now a bunch of dudes are going out writing a bunch of notes to people they love. And the guy I talked to yesterday, Stu, I don't know if you noticed, like in a comment, he's like, I have some notes to write. He just said that. Well, I knew what he
Hmm.
meant because that's what we talked about. And so my point is, if you have a desire to be better, then the tools are all there. You just don't know they're there and you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And most of them are simple. And I love you highlighting the calendar tool because, dude, like your kids are going to remember that, man. Like you don't want them to remember the looking through the thing. You want them to remember, Dad,
Hmm.
today is today's the day. And I love what you also said, Adam. If you want to know how to be better, and if you're saying you're doing it for your kids, ask them.
Yeah.
Ask them, do you know I'm doing this for you? Do you want me to do this for you? And just be prepared, right? Just be prepared. So I love that. Thank you for highlighting that. One question I have, and I want to kind of go back a little bit. Dude, you love the military. I want to make it very
Yeah.
clear to all our listeners, you love them. You've dedicated your life to
For sure.
creating an avenue for people to achieve financial independence. Can you talk to us about like why is it finances, right? Like
Hmm.
why did you choose the ADPI path to create financial freedom for military members?
So, yeah, I think there's a few reasons. One is, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was very paycheck to paycheck, and it was because that's all I ever saw was paycheck to paycheck. It was what I saw as a kid. It was what I saw in all of my enlisted friends. It was what I saw all the time, right? I never was exposed to, the way I usually talk about it in like coaching sessions and whatnot is like, okay, we all have a wireframe, and if I'm not a website builder, but that's what the thing I use, right? Is you can build a wireframe for a website, and you can use it across your various different pages on your website. We all have a wireframe built in our brain that is how we look at the world, right? Of certain lens, and until somebody comes and crumples up that wireframe and creates a new one, with like we're stuck with that one. That's just kind of where we go. My wife was the one who crumpled up that wireframe for me, and I said, wow, you save money. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like I've never seen 10 figures in a bank account. I'd never seen, like, other than coming back from a deployment, which was quickly spent on a brand new motorcycle or some other nonsense, right? That was the only time I'd ever seen 10 figures in a bank account. Um, so that didn't make sense to me. So
Just to
my
be clear, when
goal,
you say 10 figures, are you like including the decimal and the two zeros?
no, 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 10,000 or more
Okay.
in a bank account, right? 10,000 or more.
Got you. I was
Yeah.
thinking like 10 figures, like 100 million bucks. I was like, you
Oh,
guys
I'm
are
sorry, 10,000 or
balling.
more. No, no, no. Sorry. I totally said that wrong. Totally said that wrong. I'd never seen
I just
10,000 or
want to
more.
clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. Five figures or more. Yes. I mean, we are total ballers, as you can tell by my tiny office. But but no, I'd never seen $10,000 or more in a bank account. So to see that, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And then she showed me that she had this thing called a TSP, and I was like, what? Like, not, you have money in a savings account and investing, right? So I was blown away that this was something that people did. So when I started researching and realized what we could do with our future and kind of building out what that looks like with real estate, and then coming in at the front end, the beginning of ADPI, and getting brought in to kind of show people what I was learning in real estate and how I was building apartment building, or how I was building my portfolio of apartment buildings, and I was like, this is so massively life changing for me. If I can crumple up somebody's wireframe at 20 years old when they first join the military, so they don't have to wait until they're in their mid 30s to start this, like I did, this could really change a lot of lives. So we've had one guy in our group, like I think it was like 23, and he had announced that because of this group, he became a millionaire at 23, investing in real estate. And I was like, holy gracious! Like if I could have been a millionaire at 23, the trajectory I would have had, like it. So. Finances, I think, play a huge role across the board, right? Um, if you can get rid of the worry about money because you have that already set up, the rest of your life kind of can fold into play. Like, what's the number one reason for divorce? Money, right? conversations about it. Usually it's the communication portion, not necessarily the money, but it's the fact that they haven't communicated together about money that turns into the problem, right? But if we can get to that point where we're financially stable, we're teaching people that this is how you could do this to eliminate that one concern, right? And how to actually bring your spouse in on this, how to have these conversations. And for me, the passion with real estate was already there. So I mean, it was an easy transition for me to say, hey, I need to help more military members do this, right? I'm happy to help with personal finance stuff as well. Like that's one thing that I always, always, always harp on. Don't go like get your personal financial house in order before you go buy an actual house because you're only going to get underwater even worse. But man, I've personally seen, of course, what it can do for me as well as a bunch of other people. So
Hey, I'm
I
curious
love
how.
that. Thank you. And I'm such a
yeah.
baller that I said 10 figures was 100 million, which that's 9 figures.
It's nine
That's the
figures.
kind
Yeah,
of baller
I
I am,
was
dude.
not
That's the
gonna
kind of baller
harass
I
you.
am.
You were you Army? Is that what it was? Is that yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes, all the time. Uh, hey, Adam, how do we get our kids involved in business and real estate and entrepreneurship, in teaching them,
Hmm.
financial literacy? Like, what are you doing to get your kids involved? I know you said that you brought them to your conference. You're showing them different stuff. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing specifically to get them engaged and learn?
So there's quite a few things. One, they are always listening to my conversations, whether I want them to or not. They're there, right? And a majority of what people learn, what kids learn, is caught, not taught. I think is the term, right? So they're catching it constantly by me talking about it. But I also talk to them about it, right? Like if we're, maybe they're asking about, and again, they're 9 and 5, so you have to take it into consideration of what are they capable of understanding, what are they not capable of understanding, and don't shortchange them. They can understand a lot more than we think they can because we just think that a 9-year-old can't do these. No, no, no. A 9-year-old could pick up a lot more than you think. So I was on one of my buddies' podcasts. And he was saying that he had a house for each of his kids, and I was like, boy, that's amazing. So they go over the numbers. They go, okay, well, this is what an HVAC cost, and this is what we didn't have a renter in this month, so we didn't get any income. So this is what happened to your bank account, and showing him all of this stuff to kind of expose him to that. So that was like the impetus for me, like I really need to make this happen. So I started having conversations with him. Hey, like this is what Daddy does. So like apartment buildings. Look at what happens when I put money into this, and I've helped other people earn a lot more money by having them invest in these properties. And then my son, at the time I think he was 7. He was like, I think I can invest $100 in that, Daddy. What do you think? And I said, absolutely. So we started talking like, what does it mean to invest? So if you go ask him right now, like, what does it mean to invest? And he'll probably have a good answer. Well, he'll probably show me up and tell me that he doesn't have a clue just because I'm saying he's going to have a good answer. But he'll probably have a good answer for what that means. But I'm constantly talking to them about it. Part of the homeschool thing is I bring them to these to that Fambundance thing, and while we were at Fambundance, they got to learn what it means to pitch a deal, right? So they get to make up a product on the spot and then pitch it to like the first person they had to pitch it to was a caveman. All right, a caveman is your clientele, like that's who you're trying to pitch to. So they came up with a pitch and they got on the stage and they got to tell people what, like, hey, this is the product we curated and this is what we're doing. This is why it works out for like so just and that's a fun thing for them to do that teaches them what it means to sell a product, what it means to learn about what business is. So I'm including them in a lot of different conversations. I want to, and I've been saying this for way too long, and haven't done it yet. But I want to, and they're down for it. They're ready to do it. Daddy just hasn't pulled the trigger yet. Do a vending machine route with the boys, right? Buy a couple vending machines. I was going to do the house thing, and then the more I talk to them about houses, like my 5-year-old's like, I don't understand that, but a bag of Doritos. Totally relatable. Bag of Doritos is totally relatable to my 5-year-old. An HVAC system, not as much. So it's like, all right, well, this is easy and it's a much lower cost. I could just, spend a few $1,000s on a couple machines and let's put them out there and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to talk to them about money. Probably too much, if I were to guess, because they probably are like, Dad, that's enough. Like, I don't. I mean, I'm even wearing a shirt that says "Enjoy Capitalism" on it. Like, it's like this. This is they're exposed to it constantly. So
Well, I think it's amazing. I don't think we could talk about it enough. But there's two things I don't think we could talk about enough, and that's literacy with our faith, right? With our faith journey, and what's crazy is the amount they listen. Like when I turn on a podcast and the kids are in the back,
mhm.
like I let them maybe play a device on a long drive, and I'm listening to I'm a fanboy for John Mark Comer or Rick Warren, It's amazing to me when we stop and get out wherever we're going, like the stuff that I didn't even think they're paying attention. And they're like, "Hey dad, so when he talked about Jesus and this and that," I was like, "Oh wow." And then the
Hmm.
other is money, dude. Like money, like you said, the blessing of financial literacy can avoid huge pains like
Oh yeah.
divorce and just some significant life issues that you don't have to be a millionaire to avoid them. You just have to not be negative a million potentially, right?
Yeah.
You just have to be positive and understand. Hey, let's talk about biz dad. So
Hmm.
what was the motivation behind that? Awesome podcast. Congratulations on getting that thing. You're about 35-ish episodes in right
Yep.
now, right?
Yep.
And had some awesome excuse me, awesome guests, great
You're just
shows,
saying that
long
because a couple of
form.
your guys were on there, right? Is that?
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's right. That's
I
right.
haven't been on there yet. And Stu hasn't been on yet,
Yes, I
but
have. You
yeah.
didn't
He
even listen.
has.
You didn't even
Have
know,
you?
dude.
I didn't even listen to that one. I
Of course you
must have
didn't.
Yeah,
naturally
it's on the
filtered out
automatic
that
delete for
episode.
anything that says
Yeah.
stew on it. Yeah.
Anything that says Stu, I like it goes to archived. Um, but I do, tell me about the podcast. I'll listen about the podcast and just the motivation behind it, dude, because I just love the content and the idea behind BizDad.
So I think if I was still in the military and I was doing all of this, it would have been the mill dad, right? Because there were a lot of similarities I saw between business owners, and we already mentioned it now, and military members, and how we are very driven, very motivated to get things done, like wanting to attack, 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 and move on to the next thing, which can be a detriment to our family. So it happened in the military and it happens at the business side. So as part of my keeping myself honest, I have interviews with other dads, conversations with other dads about how they're crushing it as a dad, or maybe how they're screwing it up as a dad, so that I can sharpen my sword and say, okay, this is how I can be a better dad. This is how, and then hopefully, hopefully somebody else gets something out of it as they listen. But selfishly, it's so I could keep my sword sharp and know that I'm staying a good dad, right? Um, Hopefully I'm not getting done with it going, oh, yep, better dad than him, thank God. But it's like, oh no, this is how I can take what they're teaching me, right? So,
I'll be
I
that
didn't
guest for you.
Happy to have it. Bring it on. Yes, looking forward to it. Don't yell at your kids in the backyard playing football. Got it. Check.
There
So, uh, but seriously though, it is one of those things that's my sole purpose with it is to hopefully help other dads kind of learn the pitfalls, the mistakes, like how other dads are working on crushing it and including their kids in business, or maybe not including their kids in business, how they're balancing the two of them together. If balance is even a word we can use in that, right? But that was kind of the impetus, was just I just want to have good conversations. And that one conversation that I talked about um, with the dad was which Devin Elder was the podcast I was on his when I was talking about that, and I said, if I learned this from just being on his podcast, what can I learn from inviting a bunch of other dads to talk about all of this? So that was kind of where I was like, I'm just going to have conversations with dads and learn how to crush it. So that was how that all started.
Give us some advice. What's a few practical steps that you've learned from that podcast, and what have you put into action? You already talked about putting some time on the calendar and
Yeah.
carving out today. What else? What can we leave with a few nuggets?
Honestly, some of the stuff I've already talked about, I learned from that podcast, right?
Awesome.
And so I think one thing that I also learned was including the kids in the business was one of those like touchy situations, right? Where, because I ask that rather often, like, are you planning to include the kids? And and I always thought I was kind of weird in this, but it seems that maybe all of us are just as weird. It was like, okay, I want my kids to be exposed to it, but I don't want them to feel like they have to do it. Like when I joined the military, that's all I knew. I didn't know that there was another option out there. Like right down to my parents said, "Hey, you should be an officer. You'd be a good officer." And this is in high school. And then they both of them were in the military. My dad was a recruiter for the Air Force, and they brought me to the enlisted recruiter. Like there was no other, like you're telling me I would be a good officer, I should be an officer, and then bring me to the enlisted recruiter. Like there was no other options. I didn't know there were other things. So I want to expose the kids to as much as I can, and that's another thing that I'm learning from a lot of dads is like let's expose them to as much as we can. Like if they want to go to college, great. If they want to be part of the business, great. If they want to do something else, great. As long as they know that they have options, as long as they know that no matter what. As long as they're not breaking the law, dad's here to support you. Like, and if you are breaking the law, I'm going to help you as much as I can, but the law is still the law, buddy. Like, but being that present dad that shows them what the options are, that's available at all times, And another thing, like when you get to a certain point, I I took a lot from the trials and tribulations that I went through in life, right? Both as a child and as an adult. And my goal is to make those things not necessarily be needed for my kids. So how do we create trials that are going to give them the sharper sword when it comes time for battle that I built through life that they're hopefully not going to have to build through life. I don't want them having to ever make powdered milk, right? You don't have to make powdered milk. We can go to the store. Last night I went and bought an $8 gallon of milk because I realized at 10:30 at night that we didn't have milk for the next morning. And I said, well, I'm going to go out and get it. And where's the only place at 10:30 at night to get it is the gas
Uh,
station. So go to the gas station, spend $8 on a gallon of
nice.
milk. Right. So my kid's not going to have to make powdered milk tomorrow morning because I was able to go spend $8 on a gallon of milk. That would have never happened when I was a kid. We had powdered milk because we couldn't afford the regular gallons of milk. Right. So, but that did give me a lot of tools later on in life to understand, okay, well, like I've got it really good. So how do I help my kids? And a lot of other people are like, how do we give our kids adversity? So some of the other things that they're doing, okay, well, let's give them physical adversity, making sure they're in sports. Let's bring them to places that challenge them. Let's take them out camping. Let's teach them how to do things that are difficult. Let's put them through trials that are tough. Let's make, like, if we make a decision, we're sticking to it, whether you like it or not. You made the decision to this commitment, you're going to do it. So creating the not really fake challenges, but challenges that are going to sharpen their sword. Um, yeah, so I think that that's one of the things that I really want to stick to is really challenging my kids all the time and making sure that they understand what they're capable of.
Dude, I love that, man. And I'll tell you, it's funny that you mentioned your podcast is a mechanism to get, personal growth and very selfishly get mentorship. Stu and I say that all the
Yeah.
time. And I'll tell you, very practically speaking, and how, we talk about this, surround yourself with people, have these conversations, and here's a very, very practical way that happened today. You said something about real estate and getting your kids involved, and I had never considered that I have my personal portfolio has houses that I can actually use as I've been hesitant to bring my kids into real estate because I'm like, man, I got to acquire. We have to go through an acquisition process for them to get a
Mhm.
house and learn. They don't. I have some houses that I personally could just say, okay, this is now, are you interested? This is now yours. You'll buy it from me and you get to reap.
Mhm.
And we have those conversations. I never thought about that. Maybe it's just because I'm a knucklehead and I'm a knuckle dragger, knucklehead, just a knuckle guy. But, that, like, just this conversation has opened a world of possibilities to me that I never considered that could benefit my kids and give a real path towards having these conversations. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
But it's also, very practical, right? Very practical. Every one of these conversations I grow from. And so as we sign off and go into level up, I just want to encourage you to continue to just absolutely crush what you're doing, dude. Like, you're inspiring dads. The ADPI, the mission, just to bring financial independence to military members, shows your love for them, your service for them. It's absolutely incredible. But dude, I think there's also a huge spiritual component to what you're doing, man. Like, as a believer, you're potentially bringing, the love of Christ into that home as well through these very practical mechanisms. And so, man, I'm just honored to talk with you today, and I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, because you're not going to realize the number of lives that you're truly impacting. You're just not, and it's significant and it's huge. And you also do charity work. You had Stu on your podcast. Like, I love that. I love that. So keep doing those things, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you much. And to go to bounce off what you were talking about with the house thing is there was one guy I had on my podcast, and every time that they would buy an apartment building, the kids part of the kids' money would go into it. And the joke that they always had was, "Which doorknob do I own, Dad?" So then they would go, like, they go walk the property and say, "Hey, this is your doorknob." And they'd go choose their doorknob. So, like, it brought them into the fold of, like, okay, this is part of what we do. Like, I literally own part of this big apartment building. I used to live in apartment buildings, but never knew people owned them. Like, I didn't know if somebody owned it. These kids get to be introduced to, okay, you own this door of this apartment building. Like, how awesome is that?
It's rad, man. Super rad. Hey, man, we could probably go for another hour, but we gotta cut it. Where do people find out more about you, about BizDad, about ADPI, all that stuff? How do we what do we put in the show notes for them?
Yeah, so Adam at activedutypassiveincome.com. You can reach out to me on there. You can go to activedutypassiveincome.com and check us out. We have a Facebook group, all sorts of different education, free education as well as paid education, kind of depending on what you're looking for. If you're non-military, you can reach out to me, Adam at ralcapitalgroup.com. Especially if you're a biz dad yourself, if you're interested in jumping on the podcast, you can find me on there, the biz dad. You can find me all over social media and doing all that stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. We'll put all of that in the show notes. Hey, I appreciate this conversation. Like David
That was
said,
awesome.
learn some and taking some stuff and putting it into action. That's the most important thing. So guys and gals, reach out to Adam. He is a wealth of information. Put his contact information in the show notes. And hey, let's all go take uncommon action and make this world a better place, be better dads.
Love it.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Adam.
gentlemen. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Love it. Thanks.